It's easy for us to see and look at people who are successful, who've achieved what we see as certain hurdles, or they've achieved some really big goals. It's easy for us to look at them and say, wow, they have more willpower than me, more self control than me, more discipline than me. The reality, though, is that most of these people really aren't all that different from us. What we see in the concepts of a book like Atomic Habits, which we'll be talking about today, what we see as disciplined people, often it's the fact that they're simply better at structuring their lives in a way that helps to lead to achieving these goals, these successes that we see.
Yay Networks.
A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter and they really help us. Change is hard, y'all, even when it's something that we know is good for us. It's something that we know is going to benefit us. It is not easy to create new habits that truly stick, to hardwire these behavior changes that are lasting for those wellness promoting behaviors. And so in this week's episode of Fueled, we're talking about atomic habits. This may be a book that you've read. It may be something that you've heard people talking about. Atomic Habits is a book by James Clear. It is one of the most useful tools. It talks a lot about philosophy on habits and behavior shifts, but also a lot of really specific step-by-step guidance on this. So to help talk through this with me, I'm joined by Trevor Manuel. Trevor is our wellness manager with Ochsner Fitness Center.
Hey,
Welcome.
how are you?
So y'all may have heard Trevor before. We've talked about fitness trackers before. And Trevor, you're one of the, when I think about someone who is, I knew without even asking you that you had read Atomic Habits and probably put a lot of it into practice yourself.
Yeah. I live in the realm of motivating people and getting people to help achieve what they want. So in terms of with what I'm doing and helping clients get to where they want to accomplish, whether it's goals or habits, right? A lot of it's just with motivating them to just be better, right? And to become a better person that they want to become.
And things that are lasting and sustainable, and something that we'll talk about, but just kind of a sneak peek. One of the biggest, I guess, areas of focus in this book, Atomic Habits, is it's less about the end goal. And so as you're listening to this, you may think, I want to lose weight. As we're recording this, we're like right in the middle of Alcohol Free for 40. I want to stop drinking. I want to lose weight. I want to get to the gym more. I want to save more money, whatever it is that you want to do. I want to have a better garden, whatever it is, that end goal is often what we think of. Yet what you'll hear Trevor and I talking about is how this breaks down into more about focusing almost on like these micro steps and behavior changes. And that's really kind of the underlying premise.
Yeah, I think the big thing too, anytime someone approaches me and says like, hey, I want to lose 30 pounds, or hey, I want to be a better father, or hey, I want to do A, B, or C, it's why. Like, what is the reason why that you want to do that? And if it's something that's like really big and that's going to be extremely motivating for you to do, then all these micro and atomic habits are going to be super easy to put into place. Yeah.
And when we're talking about, you heard some of the examples that we gave, whether it's save more money, like Trevor said, be a better father. There's so many things that you could be looking to shift, change. And one of the things we'll also be talking about is it's so easy to not do the thing that we want to do.
Yeah. The low hanging fruits that are out there are really easy to get caught in the trap of bad habits.
It's
right?
what has that it either feels good right in this moment, or it's fulfilling some sort of a need or something like right in that immediate time, yet it's not really what's helping us reach that end goal. One of the things that we've talked about like on this podcast before is things like ultra processed foods. And I'm going to just kind of talk about one of the pages out of Atomic Habits before we really get into the step by steps. But one of the things that James Clear talks about is, y'all have heard me on the soapbox before, but the food industry spends a lot of time, a lot of money to find exactly what that bliss point is for each product. And so, that ice cream that you have that has that right blend of creamy ice cream with some sort of a crunch in there, a little bit of salty, a little bit of savory, and with the sweet and creamy, that's not by chance. It didn't just happen that it is that delicious. It is this precise blend of salt, sugar, fat that is lighting up our brain and wanting us to keep coming back for more, more, more. And so that's just one example of what's happening in the food industry. We've actually done a whole podcast on this before on food addiction, and I'll link to that with a researcher who is just brilliant in that. So if you want to hear more about that and sort of how is our how's the food supply basically engineered to make us want more, more, more. But it's not just our food. One of the things that is pointed out in this book is all around us, everything is engineered to make things look very attractive, shiny, and that instant gratification.
Yeah, it immediately it all a lot of like what our marketing is telling us is that it gives us a lot of immediate enticing feelings that are going to spike a dopamine response, and then we're going to want that craving. We're going to want that reward that comes out of whether it's ingesting it or doing that action. And there's multiple traps that are out there. And
Social media.
Yeah. Social media is the number one trap.
Right.
And a lot of times it takes away a lot of our time that is extremely valuable,
right.
that is limiting us from doing the things that we actually want to do.
Right, yeah. Right. So social media, if you think about like that, the instant reward there, you do a post, what about the likes? What about the comments? And yet maybe what we really want to do is like deepen our relationships with people around us, or I want to get to know the people in my neighborhood better, or spend more time with my parents, or they're getting older, or whatever. Yet our faces are in our devices because we're looking at things like social. Same things could be said for gambling and things like that. So, the world that Trevor and I are in is, the fitness center world, Ochsner Fitness Center, and we're looking at nutrition. Our registered dietitians there. Trevor works, side by side with our personal trainers there. We're looking at behavior change specifically there. So we'll probably talk less about gambling and more about food and movement and stuff. We can't recommend this book enough. And as you look, there's over, 250 pages of really good content. So we have kind of huddled and said, okay, here's the top aspects of this book that really stood out to us for things that have motivated us personally and things that have helped us guide clients onto a better path.
Yeah, this book is extremely unique because every time you pick it up to read it, you're going to capture something different.
Yeah.
And it all has to do with your environment and the current thing that you're going through.
Right.
Maybe whatever bad habits that you may be dealing with that you recognize. Like for me, the last time I read this, I had become a new father. My son was only like a month old. And now reading it again, he's 3 and I have another 1-year-old.
Right.
So a lot of things are changing. And as I'm reading it again, it was like, how can I implement these habits to where he picks these up, and how do I become a better parent with some of these new habits? And so it is interesting that you can constantly just keep rereading this book and continue to adjust and to change and to create new behaviors and new habits.
It's almost like it could be like an annual read or at least every 2 to 3 years. It's something that I'm going to be sharing with our dietitians and our system, because it's something that not only for us personally, but also using a lot of these strategies to guide. The last thing we'll say before we kind of dive into our favorite aspects is this doesn't take the place of working one-on-one with that behavioral therapist, whether it's a psychiatrist, psychologist, or social worker. This is something that can work, side by side with that, in collaboration with it. But know that if there's certain things that are really these vices that have that grip on you, and you feel like you're sinking, you feel like you're spiraling, something like this book, Atomic Habits, can be really, really useful. But know that, if you're in that space and you need more, know to reach out. And if you're not sure where to reach out, you can always message me and we can provide guidance wherever you are. We can provide guidance on, people to connect you with there.
Absolutely.
So with that, I'm looking at, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 sections, maybe a little bonus 7th, that really resonated with Trevor and I. So starting with the first was actually, and there's a lot of chapters. We're going to be talking about 6 to 7 of them. Chapter 1, though, was really caught both of our eyes.
Yeah. So chapter 1 being, what is Atomic Habits, right? And atomic being that it's super small, it's super tiny, and it's super specific. And so whenever we are adjusting to new habits, what are we doing? And can we boil it down? We talked earlier about like identifying the why. Like, why are we doing this? And can we create habits that are super small that are super tiny that take no more than 2 minutes to do? And can we add that into what we're doing every day? Right? Can we create new habits that help us become the person that we want to become? And so I think the biggest part in that chapter was that making the 1% change,
Yeah,
right?
tell us this, how kind of your explanation of this 1%, because a 1% improvement seems really small to someone.
Yeah, it is really small, especially for us that live in that realm of instant gratification.
Right.
And we want to, like, all of a sudden I'm post high school athlete or post college athlete, and I don't look like the way I used to look. And I put on 30 pounds and I want to lose that 30 pounds. Well, it's not going to happen overnight. It takes 1% change. And that is a daily test that you have to keep doing. You have to keep doing every day. And it requires a habit. It requires a good, healthy habit. Uh, but so like a 1% change is like we look at a linear focus in terms of a graph of where we are and where we want to become. But 1% change is going to require us to be a little more slow in our ramp up, but it's ultimately going to get us where we want to become in a better way, right? Goals typically they come and they go, but a healthy habit is going to be something that's life sustaining. It's going to go on forever.
A lot of times you could say like that goal is sort of like a wish.
Yeah.
If you just say, I want to lose 30 pounds, well, you may as well be saying like, I wish, or you're
Right.
kind of like, you've just got it. It's like floating out there. Looking at this 1% rule, one of the things that James Clear, the author that we're talking about of Atomic Habits, he acknowledges like improving by 1% isn't noticeable. But if you're, and he's like, it's not notable, it's not even noticeable most of the time, but it can be really far more meaningful than like just setting that goal. And so he kind of works the math out for us. And so if we can get 1% better every day for a year, literally just like a trivial, minuscule, insignificant amount that you're not even seeing or feeling the difference. But if we can do that 1% better every day over the course of the year, we're 37 times better at the end of
Yeah.
the year. The flip can be 1% worse, which can be that slippery slope that sometimes, whether it's with ourselves or someone else, we may see that things aren't going so well, or there's a little bit of a concern, but we don't think it's so significant until it feels like it's out of hand.
Yeah. And so I think with what James talks about, especially in this chapter, is that we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. And so our systems being the habits that we have in place whether they're good or bad, that's where we're going to fall to. Right. And so making sure that what are we doing now to help get us to where we want to be 37% better.
So,
Right.
our big picture of kind of our overarching of what we're going to be focusing on for the rest of this episode as we're talking about atomic habits is whatever that goal is that you have in mind, put it aside. We would almost say, forget about that. Forget about what that big goal is. And instead, focus on, as Trevor said, the systems. And you may say, what does that mean? Focus on my systems, the processes that you have in your life, your behaviors. We can use different things. So the book refers to it as focus on our systems. So you know, what is the flow of your life, your day, your mental pathways through the day? What are your systems or processes or behaviors? And let's focus on that, because that and shifting that little 1% is going to get us there and keep us there way more than just that big goal. I want to lose 30 pounds.
Yeah. And for most of us, our first symptom of the day is that our alarm goes off. We turn the alarm off. We pick up our phone.
Yeah.
Right. And we immediately fall into this unhealthy habit that falls into a trap of, am I going to check social media?
Right.
Am I going to feed my instant gratification of how many likes did I get on that
Right.
post, or what did this person say about that? Like, not important, right?
Versus our mindset
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
day.
Can I meditate? Can I go for a run? Can I do something? Like, is that a better habit that I can tie in that?
So our overarching first, number one is, if you're looking for these strong results and lasting results, forget about setting these lofty goals and instead focus on your systems and your processes instead. But it's not always easy to do that. So we can say it. It's easy to say, lose those goals, focus on your systems and your processes instead. But just that example you just gave about, you wake up and what's the first thing you do? You're checking your social. That's, like we were saying in the beginning of the episode, there's so much that is the immediate reward that all through the day we're almost just inundated with these, I guess, temptations for that immediate reward versus keeping our focus on what those bigger behavior changes are.
Yeah. So James talks about in this chapter, chapter 15, that the human brain evolved to prioritize immediate rewards over delayed rewards, right? So in our hunter gatherer mind, we see a bush of berries, we're going to grab it and we're going to go after that instead of, we obviously don't live in the
Right.
wild anymore. So
Right.
like us grabbing our phones is that
Right.
bush of berries, and we're going to go grab it because we know the reward that's attached to how many likes that I get or who commented on what, right?
Because our brains were hardwired for survival in the moment. Like back, thousands of years ago, we weren't you like you said, someone was focused on survival, finding food. How are you gonna like not be, attacked by fill in the blank? They weren't thinking ahead to like, what am I gonna do with my life? Like what's the
Yeah,
next
no.
20 years or 5 years looking like for me? That wasn't even in the realm. And so our brains are really hardwired for what is going to give me a reward, like a reward right now. And then what doesn't feel good, and I'm gonna avoid that, or
Yeah.
what's harmful, I'm gonna avoid that. And so realizing that what's I think really interesting is a lot of the big changes we wanna make to improve our lives for the better, whether it's, exercising more, right in the beginning, if you're not used to that movement, it can hurt. It can
Yeah.
feel you can't get your breath, you're really sore after, like, it feels just like it's all feels cumbersome and stuff like that. And so when we talk about what are we going to do that's giving us that immediate reward, if we're taking a spin class for the first time, that's the opposite of that. But the long term cumulative effect of it is really what we're looking for.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we get trapped again, more traps, right? We get into this idea that okay, I have to go do a spin class and I have to do the full
Yeah.
hour. I don't have to do the
Yeah.
full hour, right? If this is a new habit that I want to create, well, I've got to do what brings me joy within that. Maybe it's the first 5 minutes, maybe it's 10 minutes, but I have to be consistent with it. And we'll talk later about the 2 minute rule
Right.
and not breaking the chain, but we have to be able to be okay with doing a little bit, right? And Atomic Habits is very much that. It's those little habits that are going to get us to make the 1% change.
And so if something like that, taking that whole spin class feels overwhelming or feels painful, it's hard to say, I want to keep doing it. And so I think just tucking it away that we are hardwired to look for that immediate satisfaction. We're hardwired for like that instant reward, that instant benefit that we're going to see. However, many of the things that we're doing, like we said, like that, that we're for the long term, you don't see it at all. So if you're like, well, I want to, do a better job at saving money, you're not going to see that right now. If you're eating to, avoid high blood pressure, you don't see this right now. So many of the choices we're making, we're not seeing the benefit of it right now. Yet we eat those foods that are meeting our bliss point and our brains are lighting up instantly. It's like opposite. So realizing that like we live in what scientists are calling a delayed return environment versus that immediate feedback.
Yeah, we don't need that anymore, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So
we need to evolve, right?
right.
We need to adjust it and catch up to the times,
So it's
right?
almost like trusting the process that, okay, I'm going to do these small behaviors every day and ultimately the results will follow.
Yeah. And it's naive to think that our food companies and our television and all of our entertainment isn't capitalizing on our
Right.
on us living in the stone ages, right? And
Right.
so we are being manipulated whether we like to believe it or not.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So another kind of, so number one, realizing that, okay, let's lose just the big goals and let's instead focus on the processes, the behaviors. Number two, realizing that we're so hardwired for that instant reward, but we have to remember that the things that are really worth it, those big long-term goals that we ultimately do want, those are usually going to be that delayed reward. And so we've got to be patient and we've got to put, that time in and that step after step after step and ultimately know that and trust that that will come. Talk to us like the identity. This to me is fascinating. The idea about our habits are shaping our identity, but really also our identity is shaping our habits.
Yeah, so this chapter really for me speaks out a lot because a lot of what I do is making sure that what we're doing, whether it's in the gym or at home, is it sustainable and can we keep doing it? And does it meet our purpose? Does it meet our why? Right. So a lot of times, like my time with Lululemon, being an ambassador with them, we spend a lot of time on values and making sure that do our values match our actions and do our actions match our values, right? So we can sit here all day and say that I want to be a spiritual, God loving, I want to be a father that my kids can look up to. I want all these things, but am I putting the things into practice that tell me, that tell everyone else who's watching me that I am that person, right? And so James talks about in the book that it's a simple 2-step process. Decide the type of person that you want to be, and then prove it to yourself with small wins and small habits and daily atomic habits.
Let's take a minute to share about Nutrafol, sponsor for this week's episode. Y'all have heard me say it before when it comes to skincare, hair care. I am a huge rules follower, also very consistent. I follow the specific recommendations of my dermatologist. And so when I learned about Nutrafol, I had first reached out to her to get her feedback on it. And she said that not only does she recommend it to her patients, she also uses it herself. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement clinically shown to improve thicker, fuller, healthier hair from the inside out. It supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting the 5 root causes of thinning: stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, and metabolism. It is possible to grow thicker, healthier hair and support our show by going to Nutrafol.com, entering promo code FUELED to save $15 off your first month's subscription. This is their best offer anywhere. It's only available to U.S. customers for a limited time. Plus, free shipping on every order. That's $15 off at Nutrafol.com. That's spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code FUELED. Another way that he says it is, we make the mistake, we're trying to change the wrong thing. And so we think about outcomes, which are sort of that goals. And we talked about the processes. This is what we are, kind of the steps that we're doing. But identity, like Trevor was saying, identity is about what we believe. And I think that it's, interesting to think about, like, the example given in Atomic Habits is that, so many of us, we don't consider that identity change when we set out to, like, improve something. So someone may just say, I want to lose 30 pounds. And if I stick to this nutrition plan, then I'll lose the 30 pounds. But they're not actually shifting their identity. We see this a lot with the Alcohol Free for 40 challenge. Someone isn't seeing themselves as a non-drinker for this window. They see themselves as a drinker who's taken a 40-day challenge
Yeah,
of
yeah,
not,
yeah.
And so I think seeing yourself in a different light and giving yourself permission to have that new identity, and then thinking, what would a non-drinker do in this space? Or what would somebody who is, you know, largely a healthy eater, what choices would they make from this menu or with these food options? Or someone who lives that wellness centered lifestyle, or like Trevor was saying, a family focused lifestyle, what choices would that person make given these options that I have in front of me?
Yeah, I think a lot of us operate within a secret life, right? We do some things behind the scenes that aren't necessarily the things that we identify as or we want to be identified as, right? If I identify as a healthy person, are my actions showing you that? Am I proving it to you, and am I proving it to myself that I'm eating the right things, I'm doing the right things in the morning, whether it's like I'm telling myself that I'm going to go run in the morning. Well, a runner would wake up and tie their shoes and go outside, right? Or am I just falling into the trap of just hitting the snooze button and staying there, right? So identifying with what you say you are and who you want to become
And
is,
and that can be a really hard thing.
yeah,
I mean,
sure.
how many times do we hear people say, "Oh, I want to do that." And it's just a statement,
Yeah.
but they haven't really made the commitment to themselves. But if you're listening to this and you're listening to this far in, hopefully you are at that space where you have made that commitment, and maybe you have these challenges that are sort of derailing at times. And so just keeping in mind that when your behavior and your identity are aligned and they are side by side with each other, then you're not having to struggle for that behavior change. You're just doing the things that you already believe a person with these values would be doing.
Yeah. Every time you perform a habit that fits into that person that you want to become, you're casting a vote that says that I'm becoming this person.
Right.
This is the person I am. So how many votes can you cast, and are they going to win? Right.
Do you think it can be hard for people when people that are close to them in their lives, whether it's family or friends, then see that action that is different than the norm of what that identity that that person has historically had?
Yeah, it could be different. It could be challenging for sure. I think a lot of that plays in a part to where like, are you communicating what you want to become to this person?
Right,
Are you letting them know? Are they becoming your accountability buddy? Right. In a sense to where, hey, I want to be a healthier person. I want to be a person that can get up in the morning and go run. I want to be this person that chooses the right things to eat. I want to be a person that makes better decisions with finances. Like being vulnerable and letting them know that allows them to either hold you accountable or get on board or get off, right? And
right.
so I think James talks a lot about the habit tracker and checking the box off every
Yeah,
time you perform a habit. Those are great to post on the
right.
fridge, right? If
Visibility.
Yeah, if you put on there like I want to make my lunch every day, you post that on the fridge. Well, every time you walk by the fridge, you remember that, oh, I have to make my lunch, right? Because I said to myself and I told everyone else in this house that I'm going to make my lunch and be accountable here.
And when you're making the choices and choosing those behaviors that align with what your values are and what that identity is that you want to become. And we're not saying that like you're changing yourself. You're not faking who you are. But if you but when we're talking about this identity that you want to become, it is, if you've got someone who's never really exercised regularly and they want to work that into a lasting lifestyle change, you are changing your that one element of your identity. It doesn't mean you're changing everything about
No.
yourself. You're not faking people out or becoming something else, but that element of your identity is shifting. I remember when I first did my own little before our very first alcohol free for 40 challenge, I did a shorter version of it for myself just to see if I'm going to encourage people to do this challenge, what's it going to feel like for me? And I remember we had, you know, um, a close friend of ours had passed away and we had some friends who came over and it was crisis time and very emotional. And our friend walked in and said, you know, one foot in the doorway, hadn't even, I'm gonna have a glass of wine. We're all having wine. I said, and then he starts to pour it for me. And I said, no, I'm gonna pass. And he said, you're not drinking? And I said, well, no. And he goes, ever? And I was like, well, just not today,
Yeah.
And so, but that was in that moment a time that would have been right in line with who we were and
Yeah.
like kind of that mindset that I was in. Like, this is a really hard time. Of course, we're gonna like, sip our sorrows, and for me to have that that little voice to step up and say, no, I'm going to pass. Just do a sparkling water for me. It was like needle off the record. And so realizing that that wasn't me changing my identity. I mean, it's still everything about me was, largely the same. I was still a dietitian, ate well, moved well, but that was one element that was shifting. And so when we talk about changing our identity, it's really for many of us, it's going to be one one thread or one layer of that
Yeah.
identity. But thinking about what would someone who has this mindset and lives this life, what are the choices they're going to make? And like Trevor was saying, decide what type of person you want to be and as it relates to that aspect of that identity and then showing yourself. And when he said proving it with small wins, it's what choices are you making time after time after time when you're presented with these different options.
Yeah.
All right, habit stacking. To me, this is almost
This is
like
cool.
it's the coolest.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of I think like the backbone of this book.
Yeah. It's like a cheat code too. Right.
Yeah.
But I think with habit stacking, so habit stacking is taking what we're already doing every day, identifying our habits, and then plugging in opportunities for new, better habits that we want to adopt. Right. And so I think the biggest part with this that we tend to forget about is that what doesn't get measured doesn't get changed. Right. And
Okay.
so until we've sat down and written down everything that we do throughout the day from sun up to sundown, it's very hard to identify where I can tie in new habits. So until I write down, okay, I wake up at this time. What do I do next? Okay, I turn off my alarm. Okay, then what's next? Oh, I grab my phone. Okay, what's next? That writing down what you're actually already doing is kind of convicting and enough to where you recognize some of the bad habits that you have and you want to make a better change just from writing things out.
Right. That's
Right.
true.
And
It's the
so,
awareness. Yeah.
yeah, you're like, oh my goodness, I do a lot of bad habits that aren't healthy. I realize that I grab my phone more often than not because of the reward that I get, whether I get a mental brain fog at work, immediate my immediate habit is let me grab my phone, let me give me myself
Right.
this instant gratification of validation or whatever, and then let me start the cycle all over again. Let me go back to work, right? And so, um, writing down what you're doing,
So
right?
that establishes how you're actually spending your time,
Yeah,
which that isn't the habit stacking. Like that's first assessing what am I actually doing? Where am I spending my time? And then you can see what are you doing daily or multiple times a day. And then when you identify what some of those things are that happen like clockwork every day, it may be one time that you're doing the same thing,
yeah,
but it happens every day. Or it might be something that you're doing multiple times. The idea is whatever is that new habit you want to start incorporating into your lifestyle, pair it with one of those existing.
yeah. After current habit, I'm going to include a new habit, right?
So like as I'm making my coffee, I'll think of 3 things that I'm grateful for.
Yeah,
Because like if you want to like if you realize that you fly through life and you're not actually pausing to, you know, feel gratitude or think through that, it could be like while you're making coffee, you're going to send an email or even just write a note to someone you care about to say, "Hey, I'm thinking of you. Have a good day. I
yeah,
love you."
yeah,
Whatever it is, Um,
yeah. Some of the ones that the examples here I have after I turn on the shower, I will do 5 burpees.
okay.
Right, 5 burpees before I
Do
get in
you
the
do that?
shower. No, I don't, but it's very it could be something
It's doable.
that is very doable, right? You have so much like, how much time do you spend looking in the mirror,
Right.
right before you get in the shower? It's
Well,
like,
right.
"Can I do 5 burpees?" Yeah, I can do 5 burpees.
One of the things that I deal with, like, the old lady, like hip pains and back pains and stuff like that. And like, physical therapy has become like really like my focus of my workout is mostly physical therapy, less active workout. So for me, how am I going to do the small like movements daily? I actually start doing them in the bed before I get up. So the alarm goes off.
Yeah,
It's in the other room. My phone is in the other room, number one.
perfect.
So we don't have the phone right here. I get up, I turn the alarm off, and then I kind of like get back in the bed. I like turn, I stretch, I do like, and fortunately, we have like one of these beds that is a Tempur-Pedic,
Yeah,
so you can move on one side and the whole bed
no
doesn't
one knows you're moving.
right.
Yeah,
So every once in a while, Brad is like, "What are you doing?" But I try to be consistent with that because I found that it's preventative, And then while the coffee's making, I'm gonna do some of the physical therapy moves, So it is just, it's thinking and pairing what's gonna be I'm laughing because Trevor's like, "You can turn on the shower and do burpees." I'm like, "Or
or you can
if you're
stretch in bed.
grandma
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
you can
yeah.
do you're like PT moves." Yeah, but it's whatever that is, expressing gratitude. One that I've had people tell me, or one person tell me, and I really loved it, and I've passed it on to others. Is we've talked about like different breathing exercises that there's like 4-7-8 breathing. So breathing in for that count of 4, holding it for a count of 7, breathe out for a count of 8, and so if you're listening to this, you can pause it right now and try it yourself. So, like, count for 4 in, hold it for a count of 7, exhale for that count of 8. What that's doing is it's not number 1, it's, helping to oxygenate our bloodstream. It's helping to but that focus on those numbers and that counting is helping to clear our mind and kind of clear those distractions. It helps to lower our blood pressure, lower our heart rate. So for me, before I'm giving a talk and I'm nervous, I'll do that all the time in any situation if I'm feeling a little bit of that anxiousness. So I've shared that with people. And what I had someone tell me was that when they get to a stoplight, they do a 4-7-8 breathing. Because, I mean, you're in traffic, you're doing
Yeah.
that. It doesn't have to only be that. But if you, every time I get to a light, I'm going to do a little 4-7-8 breathing and then get on. I'm like, that works.
Yeah, and I think James talks about hijacking some good habits that you already have. So like
Right.
the one I really liked was that before you do something good, take 3 deep breaths and smile. That way when you approach
Yeah.
something that may be negative or you may feel anxious or something, you could take 3 deep breaths and smile, and it'll kind of give you that reward without having to go through all the actions that you would typically have to do to get that reward with
What
the
are,
other habit.
what are things that you personally do for that habit stacking?
So for me, a lot of it is just making sure I'm prepared, right? And so if I say I'm going to run in the morning, are my shoes out? Do I have socks tucked in those shoes, right? For me, if the habit isn't super easy, I'm not going to do it,
Do you
right?
do something um, like certain like mindfulness exercises, like while you're running? Like, do you kind of layer in like one behavior with another?
So I'll do a lot of audiobooks. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of walking, a lot of weighted walking or rucking. And so I'll do it's a slower pace. I'm not needing some high pace energy music or anything like that. So I'll listen to an audiobook or I'll listen to a podcast. And for me, that's allowing me to get two
Yes.
birds kind of in that one stone. But if talking about like habits, like if I want to eat healthier, I have to make sure I prepare
Right.
enough to make it easy, right?
Right.
Because life with two kids, especially a 3-year old and a 1-year old, it's like I'm just a lot of times what I'm eating is partially chewed up food that they spit out and they didn't want it. And so I'm like, okay, it's not going to go to waste. But making sure that if I
You're
want to eat healthier, am
planning.
I prepping the veggies ahead of time? Am I putting everything out? Do I have everything I need to prepare my lunch daily? Do I have things that I want to eat that are healthy? Right. So preparing,
And
making
you
sure everything's done.
you commute daily, and so
Yeah.
you're in the car a lot. And at the beginning of this, we talked about, Trevor is always, kind of looking for things like atomic habits and things to learn and be inspired by for himself personally, but then also to pass along with people that he's working with. And so you use that time, like you're not just driving passively, you use your drive time to actively educate yourself
Yeah.
and learn and inform and things that educate and inspire through audiobooks and things. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I can't just sit there. And I mean, my drive is pretty easy enough. The Causeway is a really nice drive. A lot of people look at it and they're like, "Goodness, I can't believe you drive across the lake every day." For me, it's a mindless 25-mile drive that it's a straight shot. The same 6 cars I get on with are the same 6 I get off with. And I can just kind of go into autopilot. Some days I get on, I'm like, "My goodness, I've been on this bridge for an hour and a half." But some days I'm already getting off. I'm like, "Wait, what
Right.
happened?" Like, and
Because
so
your mind is lost in
yeah,
what you're
lost
learning
in
or
whatever I'm reading or
right.
learning. Yeah.
Um, as you're hearing this, and so we've talked about that 1% change each day. We've talked about being aware about that immediate reward. It can be like so tempting, but realizing that that delayed reward is actually going to get us closer to where we want to be. Thinking about that identity shift, how can we start to think about ourselves in the way that person or that element of ourselves that we want to be? What do those choices look like? Habit stacking. What are things that we're doing already every single day? And can we add like one little layer into that? So Trevor was also talking about, spending time with, his wife and kids and stuff. And so as that is happening and you're incorporating that into, preparing meals and having those things there, as you're thinking about all that, it can be really easy to overthink it and kind of have the paralysis of perfection happen. And so the next layer that we want to talk about and kind of bring to your attention is really separating in your mind and being aware of if you're simply in motion, which can feel like you're doing all kinds of good stuff because you're in motion, you're planning and you're strategizing and you're learning and you're kind of like getting your game plan together. But are you really taking action? And so the difference between being in motion, but truly having that action or that behavior change.
Yeah. So, and he talks about the most effective form of learning is not planning, it's the practice. So actually going out and doing the steps, these habits, like putting it into practice, right? Start doing it, right? We were at that system leadership, and one of the biggest things that Neil, can't remember his last name, it always fleets me, but the you're amazing guy. He said that action causes motivation. When I start doing something, I then become motivated to keep doing it.
Right.
And so that's exactly what James is talking about here. That we can get trapped in the paralysis of analysis where I sit there and overanalyze what my plan's going to be, how am I going to do it, how am I going to get to be the person that I want to be, right? With all the right intentions, with all the right kind of
Right.
motion, right? But nothing's actually getting done.
So think about the person who you're researching everything about, let's just say intermittent fasting or whatever type of nutritional approach. You're researching all of this. You've got everything lined up. You've decided what this is all going to look like for you, but have you actually done it? Or in like a workspace, like you've got all these leads going, you've got all these conversations and potential things happening, but has anything actually happened? Have those loops been closed and anything that has actually been progress made? And so it's really easy to be like in motion and think that you're still making that progress. But instead, we want to make sure that you're not just planning, you're not rehearsing, and you're not gearing up for fill in the blank you want to actually be doing.
Yeah. So I think I like to think of, and I don't think he talks about this in the book, but it's like an apple a day keeps the doctor away. You
Right.
can't eat 7 apples on Sunday and
Right.
expect to have the same benefit. So I think the same applies here, is that the time I spend performing the action is not as important as how many times I perform the action. So if I want to be a runner, am I tying my shoes on every day? Am I putting my headphones in? And am I walking out the door? Is more important than I went for an hour run yesterday, but I haven't run any other time this month.
One of the things that I see people do, and I saw this with clients for years, is that that first element we're talking about, being in motion, that planning and preparing and getting our game plan together, that I I see it a lot of times with someone who wants to feel like they're making progress, but they're afraid of failing. So they don't actually start. They just get all the planning done, but they don't actually ever take that first step. So I'd say to our listeners, just try to not let that be you. Don't overthink it. And like Trevor said, the best way to get started and the best way to be motivated is just to do it. And so the taking that first step, and it doesn't have to be anything that is even close to what your end goal is, but just doing it. No, yes, you want to educate yourself, you want to feel prepared, but at some point you got to just pull the trigger. Which brings us to the 2-minute rule.
Yeah. So, 2 minute rule, James talks about in the book that your habit should start off being no more than 2 minutes. And it's back to that kind of analogy of wanting to become a runner. It's like, is the habit important enough? Am I willing to do it? And am I doing it? If I just do 2 minutes of that habit every day, then I'm 1%, I'm making the 1% change.
And so
I'm getting
not
closer to getting it done.
not putting ourselves to that perfection there. And if you say, "Well, I'm doing way more than 2 minutes," well, that's fine. But
It's
the
fine.
idea is, if you're not doing anything, instead of overthinking it and just gearing up and planning and preparing, at least do something for 2 minutes. And what I've told, clients for years is, someone say, but I don't feel like doing that spin class or going for an hour walk or a 45-minute run or whatever. And what I've always said is, start out, like if say you're going in your neighborhood, go for 5 minutes and give yourself full permission to turn around if you want to
Yeah.
after 5 minutes to stop. And I can't think of really a time that someone starts and does something like they start moving a walk or a run or a class or whatever for 5 minutes and then they say, never mind. Because usually that's sort of what we needed to get out of our own way. And like, okay, like the endorphins start to flow. We start to
Yeah.
feel like, all right, this isn't so bad.
Yeah.
But
Within 2 minutes is the barrier, right?
right,
Where we break through.
right. And so if it's, so 2 minutes is sort of the, you know, s- giving yourself these small steps that we talked about, kind of tying in with that 1%, that if we try to put too many barriers up. This is not in terms of time that I would say, but I think a similar example that comes to mind is when someone says, well, I want to be healthy, I want to eat more vegetables. I remember this guy, he ate literally nothing but fast food. Every single meal he got was from a drive-through window. And so we were working about like, okay, let's try to incorporate something whole
Something
and
whole. Yeah.
real and maybe a vegetable that wasn't just like in a fast food salad or like a slice of a tomato on something. But I remember he was like, "But I don't have time. Like, if I'm gonna eat vegetables, I like remember this guy. He's like, it needs to be organic, and I don't have time to go to Whole Foods every day or the farmer's market and buy organic produce and prepare it." And I was like stunned because I'm like, we're going from literally you're getting your food out of a window for every single meal. That in his mind, if he was gonna eat vegetables, it had to be in that way. So I was like, "Guy,
Like an
look."
all or nothing mindset.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
if you do steam in the bag frozen broccoli, I'm like, if you do the low sodium canned spinach and drain it,
Yeah.
well, aren't you losing nutrients if you do? I'm like, because this guy was like, if he needed to open a can, like
Yeah.
even steaming something in the bag in the microwave, yeah, I'm like, if you open a can of spinach, yeah, you're losing some nutrients if you drain the liquid, but like, what are you getting now?
Some is better than none. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's not in terms of time, like a 2-minute rule, but it's the same concept. He had in his head of what one thing needed to be if he was gonna eat vegetables, it was so far from what the reality was to just get started.
Yeah.
The habit tracker, you've got so many different versions of habit trackers that you do for clients, that you do with people who are coming through, like our Get Fit
Yeah.
challenge. You've put it together for people with the Alcohol Free for 40 challenge. They can look different, but talk with us about like a habit tracker and kind of kind of wrapping it up in like that, some of these actionable takeaways for our listeners.
Yeah. So the habit tracker I think is really beneficial because I think whenever we take something that may be in our mind or that we think that we want to do and we write it down, we kind of give power to it. And it's almost as similar as speaking what we want and telling
Right.
somebody what we want. We're kind of writing a contract to ourselves that in the next 30 days, I'm committing to this habit. And I like to have on my habit trackers I have, it's okay, what are the habits that I want to adopt? Why is it important? So I write underneath it why it's important. And then to the right of it is 30 days, right? And every day the goal is to check it off, right? Complete the task, make it happen. And so I think this ties back into that 2 minute rule of if I created a habit tracker and it's I want to do 50 push-ups every day, right? Realistically, I have the time to do 50 push-ups every day. Can I? Right? Yes. Do I want to? Probably not. Right. Now I'm going to create a lot of obstacles in the way, especially me. I tend to just create a lot of different reasons why I have
Right.
A, B, or C to do,
Right.
and 50 push-ups will take up some other time later.
Right.
But back into the 2 minute rule of if I just do 10 reps, that's more than nothing.
Right.
That's at least starting the ritual of doing the 50
Right.
push-ups every day. If the goal is I want to be able to do 50 push-ups every day, well, day one may look like just 10 push-ups,
And then 11.
and then 11, and then 12, and then maybe the next day I do 2 sets of 10, right? And all of a sudden I'm at 20, right? And so it forces you to start doing the task, start doing the habit, and then hopefully after 2 minutes is up, you enter in that deep state kind of flow to where all of a sudden you're done with 50 and you can move on. You can start doing something else, right? And so habit trackers for me, I think, are that contract that we tell ourselves that I want to do this because it's important. These are the reasons why, and I'm going to check it off every day.
And you
I'm
could
not going to break
use
the chain.
an
Yeah,
old school calendar, like,
yeah,
and like have it by your bedside that you did it, or you could have it on your desk. You could create one like on an Excel document that you're doing.
yeah.
You could do a Word document. You could use just a notepad and write the date and, so whatever is going to work for you, you could do it in your memos on your phone or whatever that might be. Like,
Atomic Habits has free download. Yeah,
thank you.
atomichabbits.com/media. You can go there
Okay,
and you
we'll
can
link to that.
download like all the cheat sheets, the habit trackers. Um, there's a lot that's in there. How to habit stack, things like that. It's all online there. It's really easy to download if you're willing to give up
Yeah.
your email address. You can get everything you
And
want.
free.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
include the link to that in the show notes. And then not breaking the chain and not missing two.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Don't miss twice, right? And so I think if the habit is important enough and you have a deep enough why and it fits into the identity that you want to become, don't miss twice, right? It's something that if I miss once, I can get back on.
Right.
But if I miss twice, compounded, and chances are
Things start to spiral.
that becomes the bad habit
Right.
of missing twice, right?
I think it's like that with nutrition. Someone says, I fell off track and I had fill in the blank. That's okay. But then if you beat yourself up and you do it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day, the same thing with our alcohol free for 40. If someone says, it was my niece's wedding and I had a glass of champagne, that's okay because the next day you get right back on. But if the next day you say, well, I had the champagne yesterday, so I may as well today, that's when Trevor's saying don't miss twice. So that first step that was not what you planned, whether it was missing a workout or eating something that you had tried to, not have this part of your normal repertoire, or if you did have a drink and you're doing something like the alcohol free for 40 challenge, that one slip, it's not gonna make or break
Yeah,
anything.
it's okay. It's life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you compound them one after another. You start to thread these together, and that becomes what your end is, which kind of takes us back to again that 1%. That 1% can be 1% positive improvement, or it can be 1% spiraling down.
yeah. And I think back to the habit of 50 push-ups a day, right? I could have gone 10 days in a row of doing 50 push-ups. I'm feeling really good and I miss a day. And then that second day, doing 10 push-ups is okay, right? I'm at least starting
Right.
the habit, right? If I miss starting the habit twice, that's when it becomes bad, right? And that's when it becomes something that we don't want it to become a missed habit, right? And so making sure that we don't live in this all or nothing mindset that some is better than none. right? And we can at least chip away, start the habit, even if I know I'm not going to be able to finish it, at least I started it and it's becoming ingrained in something that I'm not going to miss.
And it's funny you say that, like with alcohol free for 40, it's very top of mind because we're like right in the middle of it now. Um, we've had a lot of people who say this is maybe, well, we have a lot of people, number one, who do it every year. They complete it every year. They go 40 days without alcohol. It's their annual reset. We also have people who may tell us this is my second or third or fourth time. And the first few times they did it, they weren't successful, but each time they got a little bit longer. And then they finally get to a space where they feel that they're successful at
Yeah.
this. And I'll see on our Facebook group, we have an alcohol free for 40 Facebook group that if you're not part of it and this is something that you're interested in, join it. There's so much support. And I saw a comment from someone who was saying, this is really a lot harder than I thought. And there was a comment from another person who said they had felt that last year. And when they saw people last year posting about their successes, this person said, I felt very resentful seeing people's successes last year because it felt so hard for me. But then, this is her second time around. It was a totally different mindset shift. And so I think realizing that, you know, the first time we set into it, or even the second or third time, like Trevor said, even if you're not doing everything that you hoped you would do, you're not achieving what you had set out to, it's better than what you had been.
And
You
more than
know?
nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, so give yourself that credit for that, give yourself that praise for that, and, the same type of love and support that you would give someone else, like, give that to yourself. So our key takeaways, for first of all, do yourself a favor and either buy the book, Atomic Habits. I'm a book person with things underlined and tabs. Trevor is an audiobook person or kind of a
Yeah.
digital
And James reads the books. So I love it
Yes.
when an author narrates their own book. It's
Yes.
just a lot more passion and emphasis in the words that they read.
I agree.
So yeah, it's really good whenever I see somebody narrate their own book. So
Yes.
it's a great audiobook. And I'm pretty sure it's free on YouTube.
The
So
only drawback is he's not British. I always like if they
yeah.
have like a British accent. But yeah, so James Clear reading the book, the author is reading the book, which like Trevor said, kind of gives that extra value to that. So do yourself a favor, pick up Atomic Habits by James Clear in whatever form it is, book, audiobook, a digital type book. And kind of, even if someone says like, I don't have the time to read or do this, that is kind of like use the Atomic Habits that we're talking about for this. I used to not be a nighttime book reader, but when I started putting my phone in the other room, each night I read, it might sometimes be 10 pages, it might be two, plus or minus, depending on, oh, wait, talking about habit stacking. Do you know what I do here?
What?
Talking about my old lady grandma
Yeah,
hips,
yeah.
I use the Theragun, which is like kind of this like muscle massage device. And it's like, it gets intense and kind of gets in there. So I use the Theragun while I'm reading a few pages of whatever it is, because it's sometimes like, I don't want to take the time to use this like therapeutic little
Yeah.
thing. But if I'm doing that while I'm also reading a few pages at night, it's sort of like doubling up those two things. I want to do the reading. I don't really feel like using that therapeutic Theragun. And so pairing those two together.
What came first, the reading or the Theragun?
The reading.
The reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you eliminated your phone, or you had
Right.
a bad habit that was in
Right.
the way, you eliminated that by putting it in another room,
Right.
get rid of the distraction. You added the book, you just place your book on your
Right.
pillow, and then when you
Right.
climbed into bed, you're doing it.
Right.
Right. And then you recognize that, okay, I have this temporary issue that I'm dealing with
Yeah.
that I have to relieve.
I
I'm
need to
already
find
doing
like
something else.
10 or 15
Yes.
minutes, and who wants to just sit there and do
Right.
that? So yeah.
But because you've already created the healthy habit of
Right.
reading the book every night, you didn't decide to pick up the Theragun instead,
Right.
right? You compounded them. You
Exactly.
did 2 in 1.
So yes, that's a stacking of the habits that we did. So takeaways, that 1% change, looking literally at just that 1%, throwing the idea of a big goal out and instead focusing on our processes, our behaviors, our systems, that identity. What is that identity that we want to be, who we want to be, and what are the choices we're going to make as that person? Habit stacking. I just gave that one that I'm doing, but what are things that we're already doing that we can layer these new habits in with? Are we in motion, gearing up, planning, talking about, or are we actually in action and taking these big steps? And big steps are going to be small steps at that beginning, but are we in motion versus true action and behavior change? That 2-minute rule, make it easy on yourself, taking that intimidation out of it. And then using the habit tracker. Trevor was talking about atomichabits.com/media, has some that you can download, create your own, use these. And then not missing two. One is going to be fine. You can immediately bounce back, but not letting two of whatever it is get out of hand. All right. Anything else to add?
I think all in all, this is great. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I would say is that some is not a number and soon is not a time. So be super specific in what you
Right.
want to accomplish, like, and recognize who you want to become out of the habit that you want to adopt, and start to put it into practice. Right? Practice, 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 practice. There's never a perfection, but at least we can keep performing the practice to get to ultimately the person that we want to become.
So being specific, I'm going to do it. Some is not a number. Soon
Soon
is
is
not
not
a
a
time.
time.
Right. Like, oh, I want to do that
It's a lean
soon.
saying.
Yes. 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 So being specific, being kind to yourself, thinking about the actions, the behaviors, the processes that you've got. And like we said, treat yourself to Atomic Habits. It's been a game changer for us. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.
A tremendous thank you to Trevor for joining us today, carving out the time to spend with us once again. As we said, we'll include the links that we talked about in the show notes of this episode. Always let me know what you think as you incorporate some of the strategies we talked about of Atomic Habits into your own life. We always want to hear about it. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you'd like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com. You can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.